A people pleaser, by definition, is someone who everyone considers to be helpful and kind. Someone who is always there when you need a helping hand. However, the question is, how can this segment of our population really assert themselves and live the life they intended to live? Brenda Florida is a certified life coach, an expert in helping her clients achieve the freedom, clarity, confidence, and empowerment that they crave. She created a simple yet empowering coaching process known as the Solvent Method, which Florida says can be implemented to solve any problem of any size and scope. She joined me this week to have a conversation about personal empowerment, people pleasers, and living the life we all intended to want to live. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Yeah, absolutely. So, Brenda, if you're ready, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program, and I'm excited to learn how you help people improve their lives through your life coaching. Great to be with you this afternoon, and thank you so very much for being here.
Thank you.
So, Brenda, I know that you work with people to try and get them to a place where they live the life that they intended or wanted to live. So I'm wondering if you can tell me about all the great work that you do.
Thank you. Yeah, Kevin. So I typically work with people who identify themselves as people pleasers. Now, almost everyone, whether you understand that term, if it's familiar to you or not, you will probably relate to some of the qualities of a people pleaser because many of us will fall into these habits in varying situations. And some folks, like me, I used to live there a lot, primarily all the time, but most of us can relate. So some identifiers of people pleasers would be when we are very focused on doing for others, helping others. All of these are great qualities. But what happens is it gets out of balance. And so we begin doing for others, helping others, prioritizing others' needs or their wants, or just even silly things like where they like to go to dinner, or what, maybe where your spouse likes to vacation. All those things become actually more important than your own desires, your own preferences, your own wants and needs. And so what happens, and I like to think of it as a habit because that feels non-judgmental to me. And I don't want to be judgmental about these, qualities. They started as coping mechanisms when we were kids to get along in our families and cope with whatever the world was bringing to us. But at some point they stop serving us and people get into overwhelm and burnout and a lot of problems in romantic relationships and in their careers, particularly where they're in essence giving too much. And so I help people figure out how to set those boundaries, how to really discover what's true for them. And to then be able to say it, because we get in this habit of keeping the peace and, oftentimes silencing ourselves so that we don't ruffle feathers or, make a scene or whatever words people like to use for that. And that, again, has a diminishing return where we end up shutting down who we truly are and how we can truly express ourselves in the world. And so by releasing those limiting beliefs or releasing those habits and learning how to prioritize yourself, that's where you start to get that confidence and clarity. And I talk about freedom a lot. That's where freedom comes in, not from having a perfect life. Nobody has a perfect life, but it is being able to live your life in your own truth. So does that give you a bit of an overview?
Yeah, absolutely. And you also say that a big part of what you practice and what you do personally centers around practicality, and you work with clients to try and get them to view life from a more practical perspective. So I'm wondering if you can tell me about it.
Yeah, so I'm a very spiritual person, and I'm a big thinker and a visionary sort of by nature. So I love lofty ideals and big concepts, that people will talk about, like mindfulness, or, things spent a lot of time in business arenas where I did leadership training and things like that. So be a better leader, be a positive thinker, all these great things that sound good. But how do we make them practical when we're suffering? How do I think positive? When my mind is racing in a downward spiral of anxiety or shame or something like that, where is mindfulness and how is that going to help me? So I like to take these kinds of spiritual and mindset and emotional sort of practices that we hear a lot about in the self-help, I'll call it, world, and really figure out, how do I apply that to my life? When I'm suffering, what can I do so that that practice of mindfulness can actually shift me out of the anxiety I'm feeling, or, the anger I'm feeling, or whatever it is, and get to a more productive feeling state is really what it is. It's that, how do I get to where I can see a possibility? I can have a little bit of relief. And so that's what I do in all my work. It's especially productive when I'm coaching one-on-one with somebody, because then I can take the tools that will be best for you, Kevin, versus someone else, because we're all a little different. And so even though there are tools that work kind of universally, what I love about one-on-one coaching is that I can really dive into the specific person and the unique things that will really help them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And when you coach people, I know that you've developed a coaching method and a methodology called the Solvent Method, where you say it can be implemented to solve any problem. So I'm wondering if you can tell me about it.
Yes, it's a big claim, solving any problem. But what this is, the Solvent Method is a very simple framework, would be a way you could think of it, or, methodology that you can use to take whatever situation, whether you think of it in your own mind as a problem, whatever's frustrating you, whatever you feel stuck in, whatever you're irritated about. A lot of times people get into coaching because they've been trying something, right? They're trying to improve their relationship. They're trying to change jobs. They're trying to do so, and it's not working. They're not taking action consistently, or the action they're taking isn't really getting them the results they want. So they enter into a coaching relationship or pick up a self-help book because something they're trying to change, they're not able to change. And so what I realized, just out of my own, really my own suffering, to be perfectly honest, I spent about 2.5 years, a few years ago, in a very difficult spot professionally and financially. I mean, really to the point where I couldn't even afford my own place to live. I would have been in a homeless shelter, but I managed to have friends and family who, let me couch surf. And then I upgraded to some Airbnbs, but I mean, I didn't even have my own home for 2 years. So I had a lot of suffering because it was coming at me from multiple parts of my life. And as I was coaching myself out of that, through all that, I mean, 2 years is a long time. So this wasn't a bad day. This was 2 years. And in that, I started realizing I'm kind of doing the same thing over and over. And so I began to be able to articulate these 4 components that are part of what I now call the Solvent Method. And so I've put money problems in it, business problems in it, just, the downward spiral of depression when everything in your life seems to be going wrong, all those things I've put through the Solvent Method and found a way into a breakthrough, into an opening of possibility, of an up-leveled way of thinking. And so those 4 components are our desires. I have to know what I want. And I have to also be able to recognize when I'm pursuing something that I don't actually want. I may be telling myself I want it, or somebody in my life may be telling me I should want it, or a spouse that wants it and you don't really, so you got to look at the desire and make sure that what you're trying to do is really a desire that you have that is current right now today. We have to look at what our thoughts are, because often our thoughts, of course, are what derail us. We're having self-sabotaging thoughts. I always screw up. I'm not good enough. There are a lot of thoughts that are very diminishing that we have. So we've got to look at our thoughts and see what those are. We have to look at our feelings, because thoughts and feelings are right next to each other all the time. There's just, think of a coin and it's 2 sides of the same coin, because they're never separated from each other. If I have a really empowering thought, I'm going to feel empowered. If I have a really diminishing thought, I'm going to feel diminished. And so we have to look at what those feelings are. And then the beautiful thing about feelings is we can use those as a way to actually start to choose to feel and think differently than what our circumstance is. So in my case, I spent a lot of time creating a feeling state of abundance so I could create, then I would start to have abundant thoughts. Oh, I could do this, I could do that. Oh, that's possible. I could ask for help here. I could, because the thoughts and feelings always go together. And then the last piece, not that it's a hierarchy, but the 4th, as I'm explaining them, is action. So then once I've got my thoughts and feelings in a beneficial way, and I've got my desire in alignment, what action do I need to take place so that I can get these things happening in my world, or stop, right? The action could be to set a boundary to say no. But whatever it is, what do I need to do now so that I can solve this problem?
Yeah, absolutely. And, Brenda, I was born with what's called spastic quadriplegia cerebral palsy. Simply means that I don't have enough oxygen in my legs to walk normally. And part of my professional background and mission in life is helping individuals with disabilities, specifically people with physical disabilities, find and maintain employment. So as a life coach, I'm curious to ask you your perspective on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how do you think we close the equitable gap for folks with disabilities when it comes to employment and other aspects of life as well?
I'm so glad you asked that, because I'm very passionate about this topic. And of course, I can only relate to it in my personal experience. I'm cisgender and straight. So that puts me in a lot of affluence that, a lot of people don't experience. But I was raised in a culture religiously that was very patriarchy oriented. So just being a woman was bad enough, like that put me in that second class category right away. So I can relate a little bit that way. And I think that there's a couple ways that I would respond. I think we all have to stay congruent with our authentic nature. And there are people who are advocates and are really comfortable and really motivated to go on the march, to go, run for office, to do big external things that other people see, actions to try to change laws to try to, change public opinion and all those things. But even if that's not you, you're thinking, well, I'm not brave enough to do that. I don't have the platform to do that, whatever. Each of us in our own lives can make changes and stand in solidarity with all people who have experienced any sort of oppression, and do it in our way that is speaking up when you see somebody being bullied, speaking up when you see any sort of injustice that's going on around you, or even what happens so often is even in a family, family gets together for a holiday meal or something, and you've got some racist comment comes up, or something like that. And especially for a people pleaser, it can be very hard to say, hey, I'm not comfortable with that comment. I don't agree with you. And I don't want us to talk about this topic at the table. So I think it's just taking a stand, whether the stand may feel small to you or big. It's about doing that, because we all have a right. We are all born exactly as we are, perfectly, right? Whether, and I use the word perfectly broadly, nobody's actually perfect, but we are exactly who we are meant to be. And whether you're queer or you're, whatever group that's being, you're disabled, you're anything, whether it's gender expression, sexual expression, skin color, disabilities, you have a right to be exactly who you are. And so whatever way any of us, all of us, can stand for everyone's right to be exactly who they are, that is important work. Did that answer?
Yeah.
It's a big question. It's a big question. So
yeah, but it's an important one, and I appreciate the answer. And I just had one other follow-up for you in terms of your opinion on how we create an environment where we can be more socially unified and equitable in our beliefs. It's we live in such a partisan society where I feel as if, especially over the last 2 years, because of the result of the pandemic and all of the things that have come with that, I feel that we're getting away from having the ability to have an authentic conversation without agreeing with everything a person says. So my question is, how do you think we can get to a better place of social unity and equity?
The first thing that comes to mind when you say that is the role that judgment plays in those conversations. It's very hard. I think human nature, unfortunately, creates a propensity for all of us to be judgmental towards ourselves and towards others, and especially towards others who are doing things or living a lifestyle that we don't understand, we can't imagine, we, don't agree with, maybe religiously or just philosophically or morally or whatever tag you want to put on that. And to me, there's a big difference between saying, I wouldn't make that choice, or, that's not a lifestyle I choose, but that doesn't have to be judgment. Judgment's a very sort of emotional quality that starts to create that I'm better than you. When I'm judging you, I think in some regard, the way I'm judging you, I'm better than that. And as soon as we start creating that I'm better than you, instead of just I'm different than you make different lifestyle choices than I do. You live a different way than I do. You have priorities that I don't. Fine. Different is not good or bad, but we get into creating a system that supports this way is good, that way is bad, this is better than, that's less than. And as soon as we start to see ourselves as superior to anyone, we start to justify unkindness, really, towards them. Because somehow, I mean, I came from this really religious, Bible banging kind of background where we were judging people all the time. You know, if you didn't believe exactly the way we did, you're going to hell. You know, we were better than, nobody said it that way, but that's the way it comes out because we had the right answers. And so I think being able to always, I mean, I do this to myself all the time, to question myself and say, sure, it's fine to say what I believe in or what I stand for without creating judgment that says, well, I'm better than you because you don't agree with me. How do you feel about that?
Well, you know, for me, I'm always looking for ways to help people maximize their own personal potential. And one of the ways you do that is by embracing diversity of opinion. So I think when you embrace diversity of opinion, it helps you to make more informed decisions.
Absolutely. And I think a key component to that ability to embrace it is to get out of judgment in it. Be curious. Oh, really? Tell me more about why you think that way or why you believe that way, or tell me more about your experience with that. When I can be in curiosity instead of judgment, then I can be open to that and really hear what people are saying. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know for you, you're a creative person. You're a regular blogger. You've got your own YouTube channel. You host a podcast called Liberate Your People Pleaser. And I also know it's a Facebook group. So tell me about your level of personal creativity and about the podcast and what it's all about.
Yeah, thank you. So the podcast I love, I'm about 80 episodes in. I've been doing week. Yeah, so I feed my creative juices, I'll say, by really protecting my time and my environment, right? I really protect what I take in media, social media, you know, television, all those things. I make sure that I'm living in balance with my own needs for self-care. And that's what I think allows me to have the energy to create all these things. I've created a digital program for the Solvent Method. I'm just finishing a book for the Solvent Method. You know, I do a lot of videos and Instagram stuff. So, but I love that creative outlet, but I do have to protect my calendar. I have to protect, you know, how many times in a week I'm going out in the evening or whatever. So I get my rest, all those things so that I have the energy to do those creative endeavors. Because I will say that at this point in my life, I don't create things I don't enjoy. So like with the podcast, one of the reasons why I chose that as a medium to get my work out there and have a free way for people to engage with me is because when I'm thinking, what could I do every single week, you know, for years, give me a microphone, I'm happy. I could podcast. So, you know, you can't make yourself, going back to the Solvent Method, that's where the desire piece comes in. I know lots of people, online entrepreneurs, who want to start a podcast and they can't stay with it. And the reason is because they don't really want to. We can't make ourselves do stuff we don't want to do in a sustainable way. So that's why desire ends up, and really examining that, is it a should or do I really desire it? And so I create things that I desire, the kinds of things that feel good to me to create, that I believe will, you know, help the people that would be looking for my work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll give you just a little bit of insight on this podcast. You know, I was going to start a job, and the week before I was to sign my new contract, my contract got suspended because of COVID, right?
So right.
It gave me a chance to sort of reinvent myself, and I wanted a chance to sort of expand my resume and my experience. And I told myself before I started this particular podcast that there's only so much Netflix I can watch in a day, right? So
Right.
I started this podcast in May of 2020, and by the end of this week, we will have surpassed 400 episodes. So
Oh, wow. That's wonderful.
that's a level of commitment, isn't it?
Yes, it is. That's huge commitment. That's a lot of episodes. That's huge commitment. And do you find the same, that it's really a project that brings you joy?
Well, yeah, one of the reasons that I wanted to start the podcast is as a result of my disability. I use the podcast as sort of an extension of my social life,
Mm-hmm.
and a way to sort of extend my social connection to the world, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I find it to be very socially gratifying in the fact that
Mm-hmm.
I'm I'm able to express messages of inspiration, information, and influence.
Yeah.
So there are the three eyes for you. But
Yeah.
I try to use this podcast and all of the other speaking engagements that I do to spread inside information and influence. So it's been
Mm-hmm.
a labor of love, and it's uh, taught me a great level of discipline as well.
Yes, I love that. And one thing I'll say, it made me think of for people who relate to this dynamic of being a people pleaser, that's sort of the catch-22. It's easy for a people pleaser to stop following their own joy, to stop following what really lights them up, and get too caught up in what the people around them want to do and what brings them joy. And so they're the person behind the scenes supporting that and doing all that, and they lose track of how do I want to be an influence in the world? How do I want to put my gifts in the world? Because they're so busy prioritizing other people. And so that's, again, part of that's just a habit. We can learn to break it, and we can help others in whatever way we want to support the people in our lives that we love, and still do what is ours to do in the world.
Yeah, I always tell people that the minute you find your passion, you influence the rest of the world, right?
Yes. Yes.
Because then you have a level of energy towards something, right? So
Yes.
yeah,
So true.
absolutely. And I'm curious, Brenda, if they made your life into a movie,
Mhm.
and you wanted a particular plot line to be emphasized about your life, I'm curious, what would that be and why?
Mm. I think a lot of my journey in life has been to trust myself. And I very much believe in a higher power and my connection to that. So I don't mean that in a selfish way. I mean that instead of looking to people outside of me to tell me if I'm being good, or following somebody else's rules of how I should live my life, to really be able to know myself well enough to live in integrity with the unique individual I am. I was brought up the opposite of that. I was brought up to conform. So for me, the journey into unapologetic, authentic expression has been a really big one. It went against everything I was taught about what I should be doing and who I should be. And so that, uncovering that, who is Brenda? What is her authentic self-expression? And of course, that's not a one point in time that's what I am. And it never changes. That's a growing, right? How I express myself 5 years from now will probably be different than today. But to be able to really know myself well enough to discover who I am and live out of the authenticity of that truth, that would be probably the theme that my life trajectory has taken me on, and having the tenacity and the courage to do that when it went against pretty much everything I was taught and, raised with. So yeah, I think that would be a good way to describe it.
Yeah, and finally, I'm curious to give you the final word on anyone who may be watching this who may want some words of inspiration on how to live a sustainably fulfilled life. What would you tell
Mm.
them about the keys to accomplishing that goal?
Yeah, so this is where I'll get a little practical too. So you have to be able to connect to yourself or begin to know yourself, whatever words resonate for anyone listening to this. You have to begin to explore, who am I and what do I really want? And one of the really great ways to do that is to ask yourself, if no one would get mad, if I wouldn't disappoint anybody, if I had all the resources I needed, whether that's money or time or whatever it is, if I had the resources, what would I want to do? What work would I want to be doing? How would I want to vacation? What would I want to contribute to? Like all the questions. Because when we allow ourselves that sort of opening, typically we restrict ourselves. Oh, well, I don't have time for that. My family wouldn't like that. I can't do that because I've got kids. I can't do that because I'm too old. I can't do that because I'm too young. Like, get rid of all that and get to know what it is, back to desire, what it is that you really desire in your life. How do you want to live and express yourselves? How do you want to contribute to the world? How do you want to be that ally for equality across every distinction of human and animal life and our environment? How do you want to contribute to that if you let go of all those things that seem like they limit you? Once you start to connect to that, and again, it's through curiosity, no judgment, no restrictions, then you can start to find the seeds of, oh, that's who I am. That's what I want to do. And then I can start to live into that vision. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, tell me, if people want to get connected with you, Brenda, what's the best way they can do that?
Oh, probably the easiest way is just my website because it's my name. So it's pretty easy, brendaflorida.com. That's an easy one. On Instagram, I'm Brenda Florida Coach. And I do a lot of stuff on Instagram, a lot of reels. My YouTube channel, you can just search Brenda Florida. It's a great name because it's not very common. So Google Brenda Florida and you will find me because I'm easy to find.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with having a little uniqueness in life, right?
Yes.
Well, Brenda, I have to tell you that I thoroughly enjoyed our time together this afternoon, and to tap into some of your insights on how to maximize your life potential. Your work in the space and time on my behalf is most appreciated, and I want to thank you for engaging in conversation with me today.
Oh, I loved it, Kevin. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and for getting to know you a little better as well.